What's up, chums? Sharky here. I've been wanting to make this video for a long time, and if you're new to this channel, I don't usually make videos like this that are super serious, but I feel like for my own mental health and for me to talk about it, it will help me. So, some of you might know about my previous job. I worked there for 3 years. Back in 2022, I was looking for a new job. I didn't necessarily not like where I was at that time, but it wasn't paying enough for where I live. Classic scenario. I had applied to a couple different positions at different places, and one got back to me very quickly, and I was able to start in the perfect time frame that I needed it because my rent was about to go up, and I was really trying to find something quickly. And as soon as they called me back, I was like, yes, I'll take it. I didn't really have the time, to hear back from other places, but so I ended up taking it. And I feel, in hindsight, I feel like it worked for the time that I needed it. My husband and I were not living together at that time. He was still in Italy, and we hadn't started the K1 visa process yet. And by the way, if you're ever interested in learning more about that, I'm actually planning on making a big long ass video about the K1 visa process and how we were able to get married after we had met online and all that jazz. It has been a very long process. I mean, we've known each other for over 10 years, but we've been going at this process and we're still not done quite yet, but we have been at this since 2023 when I was still at this job. So I say that because I want you to understand the position that I was in. If you're not familiar with the K1 visa process, it's basically a visa that allows your fiance to come to the United States and get married to you. But in order to be approved for that, you have to sponsor them. Now, the spouse doesn't always have to be the sponsor, but in this case, I wanted to sponsor my husband, so I made enough money. You have to meet a poverty guideline. This job was allowing me to support my husband and his fiance visa process, basically. It was providing us with the money we needed for both me to live on my own in the meantime and support and sponsor him to come here. I'm not trying to pin any blame on my husband. It's just the situation that we found ourselves in. The manager that hired me had a reputation for not being a very good manager. A lot of things were mishandled, things were unorganized. I didn't know this until much later, but I was actually the last person that he interviewed and hired before he actually left the company. He found a job out somewhere and ended up leaving, I think, roughly a month after I got hired. And I was like, that's kind of weird. But, whatever, people move on. I don't remember how long he had been there. I don't remember that, but so he ended up leaving, and things culture-wise and just the vibe of the office, I guess you could say, was very disheveled, like it had been for quite some time, because this manager kind of just let things fall by the wayside. They also had a very small team. Even like when I came onto the team, it was still small. We had about like 7 people, and it had just, I feel like things, people had just gotten like really lenient. Uh, the vibe of the office was very, it was a lot more on the fun side, but there were times when it was very unprofessional. I feel like certain people contributed to that more than others. We did have one coworker that was very toxic. She tried to get me fired, and then there was another coworker that was kind of like best friends with her, and she also tried to get me fired. But it didn't work. It backfired on both of them, and I was not fired. But it was very difficult through that time, because you can kind of feel when people don't like you, or, you're the butt of the joke. And I've been bullied before, when I was a child. If you watched the video I made on that, detailing all of my bullying when I was a child. So I'm no stranger to picking up on that when people are making fun of you. And I'll be honest, it did make me cry. I was very upset about it. And I debated leaving at that time, but I couldn't because of the financial situation that I was in. And my husband, like, I wanted to support him. So I stuck it out. And, it worked in my favor. I just did what I was supposed to do. I finished the training. But people had tried to get me fired more than once. And it was that kind of culture that had started to brew there. Like, it was very much shit starting. I don't know what else you want to call it, where like people, drama starters, like they try to get people fired, they try to stir up stuff. We had a coworker that was very much like that. Like, she would try to aggravate people and push people and make fun of people, and it was very toxic. She ended up getting fired eventually, but the manager that had hired me left. They ended up hiring somebody from a different state. And at first, when the new manager was hired, things were okay. There were a select people that did not like them. And I wanted to give them an honest chance at, I felt like people were being unfair to them, not giving them a chance. They moved to a different state with completely different people that they don't know. Like, that's a very difficult thing to do. And to lead a team that you know nothing about. And I understand that. So I tried to give them a chance. And at first, I would say like the first half of the first year that I was there, it was difficult, but it wasn't because of my manager. It was mostly coworkers that were making it difficult for me. But as things went on, things just kind of devolved. Like, this person started to be manipulative, and like, things just between us did not add up. Like, I just felt like every time I would try and talk to them, nothing went anywhere. Like, things were misconstrued or misunderstood constantly. Like, I never felt like we were on the same page. I felt like I was perceived as lazy, which I will get into that in a second. That's a whole nother thing. But the vibe of the office definitely changed. Like, it started, and I will give credit where credit is due. Things did start to be more organized and get back on track as a business, like where we should be, instead of just party time all the time. And that was good in my opinion, like, because there were other branches of this company that were shut down because of that happening, and I think this person was trying to prevent that from happening, and I do give credit there. Like, they made a lot of changes for the positive, but at the same time things still started going downhill. As things started to pick up and we started to get more clientele and more workload, I found myself struggling with being able to not necessarily stay on tasks, but abruptly switch between tasks, because we were gradually hiring on more people because we had a very small team, but we were doing the work, of maybe eventually 20 people. But at this time, it was a lot. I mean, it started to become a lot. At first, in the beginning, it was manageable, but it became more difficult. We just didn't have enough people. It got to a point where we weren't able to complete the work because we just didn't have enough people. And they just wouldn't admit that. For whatever reason, it was extremely hard for them to hire people. Their hiring process was super long. It took me probably almost 3 weeks to be fully hired on. And then still having to do training and stuff. So it was a very long process to get into this company. Things started out going okay, and then the more workload, but we still had the same amount of people. As soon as that started happening, I started getting more and more stressed out, and just struggling with being able to complete work, communicate with my manager and my coworkers. As someone who has multiple disabilities, I've always had to find coping skills to help with doing my jobs, but it's never been to the point that it got to at this job. I feel like I've been able to manage in the past, but the expectations just kept rising, and it just became more and more difficult. But it wasn't necessarily because of me or that I wasn't working hard enough. It was literally because we did not have enough staff to complete the work. They just kept taking on more and more clients. So one of the things that I had brought up with my manager was accommodations, because I do have ADHD, I have depression, major depressive disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder, diagnosed, got the paperwork and everything. At first, I had tried going on ADHD medication. I have done this in the past, but honestly, in my experience, I feel like it makes my depression and anxiety worse to be on ADHD medication. And I have tried, being on multiple things at the same time. Sometimes I forget a pill. When you have to take pills every day, I know it seems like a simple task, but it can be very difficult. Sometimes if you miss a pill, it kind of screws things up for a little bit and you get back on track. But so I went on ADHD medication. It did help me focus. I felt like I was more productive, but like I said, it made depression and anxiety worse. And I was angry every day. I was, messing some stuff up just because I was focusing so hard that it was like too much. And we tried like changing the dosage and all that stuff. I just didn't like it. I didn't like being on ADHD medication. I tried to keep this job as long as I could because I needed it, for my husband and I. So I ended up going off the ADHD meds, and I tried, we'll get into the accommodations in a second. I tried going on antidepressants this past year, and it basically just made me numb. Like, it started to help at first, and then I just basically lost all of my motivation and personality and everything, and creativity. Like, I just felt like I was numb to everything, like no emotions whatsoever. And again, we tried lowering the dosage and everything, because a lot of people tell me that, but I didn't like it either. Like, I lost my creativity for like an entire year, basically. That's part of the reason why I haven't made like hardly any videos, why I haven't done any, like, I would take forever on commissions. Like, y'all know if you commission me. My turnaround is usually like a couple weeks, but it was taking months for me to complete stuff, and it was really embarrassing for me because I just couldn't say like, oh, my job just makes me too tired. Like, I mean, I did tell that to people sometimes, but you don't always understand unless you experience it for yourself. But I was just having a very difficult time, like, with this job. With all of that said, that's just kind of like a general overview. I want to read you guys a letter that I typed up. I did not end up sending this. This was going to be my resignation letter. I wanted to just kind of write down everything that had happened as much as I could remember for all 3 years. I ended up leaving this job this month, like earlier this month. I have a new job now. It is completely different than where I was. I feel like my mental health is recovering. My creativity is coming back. I'm feeling better. Thank you for sticking by me through this difficult time. But I just want to read you guys this real quick. So, dear management team, today was my last day at Redacted. I do not wish to give an exit interview. That was something that they offered. But I will say I've never been treated so poorly for having multiple disabilities at a job before. Not only did I have my previously approved headphones accommodations revoked for the reason needing to be in constant communication with team and team lead, which is not entirely true when doing individual work, which I had specified. So I want to briefly just talk about that real quick. After I had tried the ADHD meds and I decided that wasn't helping me focus without making my mental health worse, I applied for headphone accommodations. Now, I will say, when I first started this job, I was told that headphones were not allowed. They didn't really give a reason. I guess it had been abused in the past. People were taking phone calls and stuff. I use it to listen to podcasts or listen to music to help me focus. But there wasn't any real reason why we couldn't have them. It's just management didn't want us to have them. And I fought back. I wanted them because of my ADHD. So I submitted to HR an accommodations request. It was approved in like October of 2022. And then I was able to use headphones from October 2022 to like early this year. So from there to 2025, early 2025, I had headphones that whole time. And then suddenly when I had to resubmit, first of all, I had to resubmit my accommodations request. I'm like, why? I still have ADHD. Like, nothing has changed. And I had to, like, talk to my doctor and get a letter and fill out all these forms to do all this. When I resubmitted it, they denied my request for the reason that I just read. And I was like, how does that make any sense? And when I asked them about it, when I asked HR about it, they were like, oh, well, our company doesn't provide permanent accommodations. I'm like, what? So, like, if a blind person or a deaf person needed permanent accommodations, because that's not going to change, they're not going to suddenly hear or suddenly be able to see, like, how does that make any sense? Like, they don't get permanent accommodations. Sorry, we don't do that. That doesn't make any sense. Anyways, so they got revoked. I had to stop using them, and my work suffered because of it. I was making more mistakes. Yeah, they would never tell us that we did a good job. It was always like, you know, we got the shit end of the stick. They'd just be like, you know, it was worse than a pizza party. I would have loved a pizza party. It was usually something stupid, like just donuts or something. Like, I don't know. Like, we hardly ever got raises. I did get 2 raises, but one was like $1 and the other one was like 20 cents. But it was just because, like, the cost of living went up. But even then, as I had mentioned before, the process to get these accommodations took so fucking long. Like, this is what I put, which I specified, but the lack of understanding and communication from the HR team and from management on several fronts is abysmal. So it took me months to even get the accommodations approved. And then I had them for, you know, however many years, like a year. Yeah. Sorry, I'm bad at math. I had them all that time, and then they just suddenly decided, no, you can't have them anymore. Anyways, okay. So I had chosen to disclose and be very open about my struggles with mental health, like the depression, and ADHD after I got the job, including how it affects my work performance and daily life activities, but I feel like it was disregarded when discussed with management and with HR. Communication with HR takes forever to respond to accommodation requests, and they make you jump through hoops via paperwork to get anything approved. I think I had also asked for like a private place to work, which was also denied. The changed policy regarding attendance when people have real life issues and mental health struggles is unrealistic and unfair when the rest of the departments at Redacted are treated differently. So this was another thing. So as my depression started to get worse, it was very difficult for me to make it in some days, and I try my best. You know, I was on medication at one point to help me with that. They do have like short and long-term disability, but it's only 60% pay, and financially we couldn't really do that. So originally the attendance policy was that you could take negative PTO. So if you like were short, you know, like an hour or whatever, you could take that time and then either like make it up, you know, with your accrual, like your next accrual day, or you could get something like pre-approved, whatever. They had negative time. You could take negative time. Well, for whatever reason, I guess because of the type of job that we did, because it was reliant on the mail coming in, they changed the policy, which I didn't even know until I think like last year sometime. But they had changed the policy only for our department that we could no longer take negative PTO, and every time off request had to be approved. I know what you're thinking. Like, oh, did they change it because people were abusing it? I don't really feel like people were abusing it. I mean, maybe a little bit, but a lot of it was for valid reasons. Like, take my friend who was my coworker, get into that in a second. Shortly after he got hired, you have a probationary period. I think it's like a month or two. And if you take time off between that probationary period, you basically are at risk for being fired. And what happened to him was, shortly after he got hired, he had a funeral to go to. And then right after the funeral, he had COVID. And he did not come into work. And it was legit, like, life issues. And they fired him over it. And, like, the lack of, empathy and understanding on that, I was speechless. I'm like he had proof, that that's where he was, and he tested positive for COVID, and it just, they screwed him over. Anyways, that's not the only person that got screwed over there. But tell me why they changed the attendance policy just for our department and not the rest of the company. Because the rest of the departments at the company were allowed to take negative PTO still, even after we had passed this. Like, they didn't even have to come into work every day. We did. Like, it was really unfair. Like, a lot of other departments were able to work from home. They were real lenient with their attendance policy, and then we have to show up every day, and even if we want to take time off, like, we have to beg for it, essentially. It is ridiculous. The accounting team and other departments get to take negative PTO and have the option to work from home, while we are not compensated for having to come into the office every day. Employees are retaliated against for taking time off by being given repetitive or mundane tasks. And I said I shouldn't be afraid to ask for a day off because it will make the team lead upset, or, it will hinder production. Because back to what I said before, we should have enough staff so that if somebody needs to take a day off, they can, and it's not going to impede on what we're trying to do. Like, to me, that should be obvious. Like, anyway. So we were not compensated for commuting. The behavior I have experienced while interacting with other departments is also unprofessional and unacceptable. We are treated poorly by other employees outside of our department. This has been going on for several years, even beyond my time with the company. So a lot of what I experienced from other departments when I was there was just like a bitterness towards our team that I don't know if they had past beef. If they did, I don't know what it was. But me personally, I would get dirty looks from people. Like, they used to buy us lunch on certain days, and it would be the whole, like, all of the departments in the building, they would buy us lunch, which is great, thank you. But, like, we'd have to, when we would wait in line for it, I literally had an experience where 3 employees from a different department just walked right in front of me in line. Didn't look at me, didn't talk to me. They just inserted themselves in front of me, even though I was clearly in line for lunch. And I'm a non-confrontational person. I know a lot of people, would be vocal about that being a problem, but I kind of just let it happen. But I did complain to my manager about it. Nothing was done. I'm not surprised, but that was one instance with me personally. But we would, like I said, we would get dirty looks. They would try to exclude us from company stuff that was going on, whether it be with seating or, meetings that we would have. Like, they would never tell us stuff when things are happening. That was also a problem with clients too, is like no one would tell us when things were updated, like if information about a client had changed. Like, communication between the departments was just not happening really. Or it was very slow. Like, it would take several weeks to get an answer on things. And that was even before I got there, all that stuff about the other departments. So going back to management, my review from July 2024 was ridiculously fabricated or exaggerated, and it did not reflect my performance at all. Like I said, because I had disabilities, I was perceived as lazy and not doing as much as everybody else, or not doing it to the extent that everybody else was doing it. I was denied a raise or changes to the review. So after I had the review, I went to my other manager and told her that I felt like it was not accurate to my performance. I don't have a copy of the actual performance review, but in a nutshell, it was basically a bunch of compliments agreeing with what I said for my review, and then they pretty much took it all back, like, right after that. So it was not really a review. It almost read like a hit piece, like those, like a journal entry from high school. Like, oh, Becky is so mean and I don't like her. And it read very much like that, like very personal, and like, well, I'm going to add this and this. It just came off that way. They exaggerated what should I call this? A scuffle that I had with a coworker. There was a coworker that I had been friends with, and I said something that was misunderstood because of a language barrier. My coworker was not from the United States, and English was not her first language. So she misinterpreted a joke that I had said, and she went to the manager about it, and I was made aware of it, and I directly went to that coworker and apologized if it was, interpreted that way, and we worked it out one-on-one with each other like adults, and it was brought up in my review, even though I had said in my review that we had worked things out, face to face, and that it was fine, like we worked through it. It wasn't even that serious. Like, it was something about, like, that I had been there longer than this other coworker, but it was a joke. The context was like we were working on something. It was nothing intentionally malicious, and I did tell my manager that. But like I said, we worked it out. There was some other stuff about, like, me not taking initiative, but the manager that I had would change their mind, like, on a dime. Like, go do this. No, I changed my mind. Go do this. What are you working on? Go do this instead. Never mind. Like, that, as an ADHD person, and, like, someone who's, like, a little slower, like, it's hard to change tasks abruptly. Some people with ADHD are really good at multitasking. I am not. I made that clear, that I struggle with changing tasks when I'm already working on something. Like, it's very, and that was perceived as like me being resistive or, lazy. And I never agreed with that. But that was in my review. Like I said, I was denied a raise. I went to the other manager. I asked for the review to be revised or changed because it didn't feel accurate. Nothing happened. The review was not changed. It was posted as is. I believed that I was also denied this raise as retaliation for being involved in an investigation with HR, as I had reported the team lead's petty and unprofessional behavior. I can't give specific examples of this, but there were a lot of times when my manager would do things that were just really petty and just really, they had control issues. Like, for example, my friend, who was a past coworker, brought in donuts out of his own pocket, and my manager perceived that as a threat, apparently, and then they brought in donuts, like a couple days later, nobody ate them. Like, and was super butthurt about it. And I'm like, that is so weird. Like, my friend would also buy snacks for people, like, for the office, I should say. And I know that there are some laws, certain companies regarding that, but it was nothing like, expensive, really. But then instead, like, my manager started, like, bringing in snacks for people too. It was just weird. Like, it's almost like they wanted the credit, and like would want attention on them. Another instance of this like petty and unprofessional behavior was my friend and I, same friend, who would bring the snacks in. We were in charge of like party planning and event planning at one time. And we would lay out our ideas and what we wanted to do. And the manager would constantly interject, and put their own ideas. Like, we're going to do this instead. Or like, how about this? How about you do this instead? And they would play it off as like a suggestion. But then, like, when we were actually doing the thing with the coworkers in the office, they would, like, interrupt what we were doing and then, like, insert themselves in what we're doing. It was just weird. It was very bizarre and very, like, attention-seeking, like, wanting credit and, like, wanting people to like them, and it was very weird. Like, that happened a lot. They would always crack jokes that were like super just odd or like passive aggressive, and I just never said anything, never laughed, but whatever. So that would happen a lot, especially between like the team lead and like some certain people. By that time, I just kind of started ignoring the manager, like all little jokes and little, trying to be cool and all that. So back to the workload. Certain clients are given special treatment. There's no real standard across all clients, and employees are often being blamed for clients' mistakes. Since I have left, that is still going on there. And it's gotten worse since I left. I totally called it. But yeah, employees, we would get blamed for clients' mistakes. They would send us stuff with the wrong address. They would send us stuff with the wrong, number on it, like WorkSource, whatever. Things that were not our fault, but we were retaliated against for. Or taken off of stuff, being given mundane tasks. Team lead has unrealistic expectations with the equipment we are given. The equipment constantly has mechanical and network connectivity issues. That would happen a lot. I know that's not necessarily the team lead's fault, but things would never actually get fixed. They would just be band-aided and then, eventually, like, band-aided again. Employees are seemingly fired constantly, including someone who had been with the company for 10 years for vague reasons or not meeting unrealistic expectations held by management. We have garnered a high turnover rate, which is abnormal. Burnout from not having enough employees, which I've already mentioned before, and poor work-life balance is prevalent. I compared it to an abusive relationship, honestly, because I felt like there were times when it would get better, seemingly. It would get better. And then things would fall to shit again. And it would just happen over and over and over. And I think that's part of the reason why I stayed so long. Because things would start to get better. And I'd be like, okay, maybe I can do this, And then it would start all over again. And I'm like, oh, this is why I wanted to leave, And in terms of like my work ethic, I'm the type of person, I just want to show up to work, do my job, and go home. I don't want to take things home with me. I don't want to take stress home with me. It got to a point where I was dreading coming into work, and that's a sign that you need to leave. But here's the thing too, I had been looking for another job since like April of 2024, and I wasn't able to find anything that paid enough, unfortunately. What I ended up doing, I talked about it with my husband. He lives with me now. He's not working still, but we're in a somewhat better position. I did end up taking out my 401k from my previous job, which I know a lot of people have qualms about that, and I know I'm going to have to pay taxes on it and all that. But I had some debt, and I actually took a pay cut with this new job. I'm making less now than I made at my last job. It got to that point where I was like, I cannot physically, mentally, spiritually do this anymore. It was so bad. My mental health was in the toilet. Like, I was either numb to everything or just like stressed out and anxious every day. And I hated it. Like, it wasn't necessarily like between me and my coworkers. It was mostly just because of my manager. Like, I had more problems between us than like my coworkers. One person, I want to say like 3 or 4 of my friends got fired from there. I was the last one, and yeah, I knew though that I was on a list. I was on the hit list because of my mistakes, apparently. I mean, with any job, like, we're humans, we're gonna make mistakes, and everybody else was making the same exact mistakes that I was. So I didn't really feel like, I was trying my best with how I am and what I have, and I feel like they just did not care at all. But back to the petty thing. So one of my friends had been with the company for 10 years, a little over 10 years, I think, thereabouts. And they fired her on Employee Appreciation Week, like the last day of Employee Appreciation Week. Thanks for being with the company for 10 years. Bye. Gets fired. Got a sweet severance. They didn't have to do that, but like, she's okay. She's doing good. But still, who does that? That was oddly specific, you know? Like, targeted. And like I said, both my closest friends got fired. Yeah, there was a third guy that also got fired I was friends with. He was before, I think he was like one of the first ones, but like the week that I quit, I got a letter from management and actually sat down with HR and management, and they basically threatened me. They were basically like, if you don't stop making mistakes right now, we're going to have to reevaluate your employment with the company. That's just a nice way of saying you're going to get fired. We're already kind of leaning towards you're going to get fired. So I said, fuck that. I'm not getting fired like my 3 other friends. Like, I'm not going to give my manager the satisfaction of firing me, because I was the last one involved with the investigation, which I'll get into that in a second. But the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the investigation. Or go back to that, I guess. But yeah, I quit. No 2-week notice. Texas is a at-will state. I just yeeted myself from the situation. I left like the week of the 5th, and I started my new job shortly thereafter. I think like a week later I started, and it's going really well. I'm still mentally healing from the trauma that was my last job, but things are going well. I feel a hell of a lot better. And things at my old job are still going to shit, which I'm not surprised at all about. One last thing I wanted to elaborate on was the investigation with HR. So essentially, all that petty stuff that I had brought up, there was some favoritism going on with certain coworkers of certain races that I and several other people had noticed, and I and several other people had gone to HR about it and told them about it, and they said, we'll look into it, or, you know, we'll open an investigation into it, which basically is code, which I didn't know that then, but I know it now, is code for we're just going to see if you're going to sue us or not, and then get back to you. Nothing was done. The manager is still there. There was nothing was done. And we were retaliated against by the manager in the reviews. It's just so unfair, like the way that worked out. But at the same time, like, there wasn't much that they could do about it. They meaning my friends. Because, like, once the manager had pretty much decided that you were going to get fired, you were going to get fired. But at least, I mean, they did get severance packages, but, like, it still sucks. It was just a really shitty situation. And I firmly believe that I was the next one on that list, because I was also involved in that investigation. But I yeeted myself. I bailed. Like, bye. You're not gonna fire me. I quit. But it was just difficult. It was very stressful, very traumatic. And I'm so glad that I never have to see my manager ever again. I'm not using them as a reference. I'm using my 2 friends that I worked with as references because, yeah, why would I ever want a reference from my manager after everything that they put me through? And it was just bad. Like, my mental health was the worst it had been since probably I started this YouTube channel, which was back in like 2015 when I was in college and I didn't know what I wanted to do and I failed the art program and all that stuff. Like, I was in the hole back then, and I feel like I was crossing back into that with this job. And like I said, I was there for 3 years and now I'm just like I can breathe. Like, I feel like I can actually relax and like enjoy my life now, and it's not contingent on what's gonna happen at work today. I'm making this video just to help people feel seen. Like, I'm sure that this happens a lot more than people talk about, and I just want you to know that you're not alone. Like, lots of people go through this. And if you're at a toxic workplace, it is perfectly okay for you to, like, look for other jobs, for you to leave. Like, if it comes down to, like, your mental health or having a job, like, there is a way. You just have to find it. Like, I understand financial stuff. It's very difficult. It is very difficult, but it's not impossible. Like, there are programs to help you. There is help. You just have to search for it. Like, for example, where I live, they have rent assistance programs where, like, if you don't make enough, there's things like Flex. Not a sponsor, just saying I use it myself. But there's things like Flex. There's also, like, rent assistance programs. There's, public assistance things, especially if you have disabilities. Like seriously look into assistance if you need it. I definitely have looked into it. I have certain limitations because I am my husband's sponsor for a green card, so things get a little complicated there. But if you don't have that roadblock, I would definitely, like, seek resources. I might even link a couple in this video, just to help out. But yeah, you don't owe your job anything. Like, not your mental health, not your soul. Like, just, if you feel like you need to leave, like, I would listen to that. Like, definitely, try and find a way out. And sometimes it takes a while. I mean, it took me over a year to find another job, and even then I took a pay cut. So, like, and I didn't want to, but it's like it gets to a point where you just can't do it anymore. So, and I'm not trying to just, like, make myself feel better. That is what it is. Like, in this economy, like, you have to have a job. But yeah, I hope this video helps you guys. And I know, like, there's probably going to be people in the comments saying, like, oh, well, maybe you should sue them, or, like, I'm done. I'm done with it. I don't want to talk to anybody from that company ever again. I'm done. It's like it never existed. But thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry this was a bit of a long one. I am planning on making 2 more videos, one being a Stratosphere 2025 FurCon review, and the other one being the K1 visa process, which is going to be another long-ass video. But we're not completely done with the process yet, so I'll probably wait until we're done with that. But prayers are appreciated. My husband and I have his green card interview on July 8th. So we'll be going to that very, very soon, and I'm getting a little nervous, but I'm ready. Like, I'm ready to get this over with. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.